Welcome! In this video, we're going to refactor the TDD quotes API. We've already got a lot of tests to create and to get quotes, but we don't have a benchmark yet. However, just creating the test to implement a benchmark is going to result in a refactor, right? We've got a lot of code right now that kind of sits within the handler. We want to abstract, we want to pull that logic out of the handler itself and put it into its own space within the repository. Without further ado, let's just hop right in and take a look at some code or start coding. Okay, here we are at the command line. I'm at the root directory. Let's go ahead and pop into the repository, tutorials, TDD. All right, I'm going to create a branch right away. Switch is really awesome. I used to use checkout. Switch is slightly more advantageous than using checkout. I'm going to add the C to create a branch, and we're going to call this bench. All right, let's drop into VS Code. I'll make it bigger so you all can see. There we go. And right away, let's open up our test main underscore test.go. And we're already at the bottom. Let's create a benchmark. Look at the editor helping us out there. We want to benchmark. How about create quote? Create quote. And right away, we're going to need, we can start the loop, right? So we'll say for n is equal to 0. Actually, what's the syntax here? While n is less than, while n is less than b dot n and send n forward. All right. What do we want to do, right? We want probably maybe we'll call it store, and we need some kind of a factory function. And this is the beauty of TDD. Like, what do I want? What do I expect? So I'm going to say perhaps new nmem store, right? Yeah. And then from the store, this will probably create an error, which for the purposes of this benchmark, we're going to throw away. We'll say store dot create, right? Or how about quote store, where the quote store create method looks better, and into which we'll toss a quote. And how about we say I don't know, something, right? An author, the dude, and the message is some fmt printf thing where n is an integer. How about we say something at some value where that is n. Okay, so now the dude's just saying lots of something. Cool. Well, we can't run this, or we can, right? And the syntax to run that command is go test bench equals anything. Okay. This is not a failed benchmark. This is a compilation error, undefined. There's no new mm store. Well, let's go and refactor that, which is going to basically trigger a whole bunch of refactors. Okay, let's see. Open up main.go. All right, we don't have any of this, so let's begin the refactor. Where are we? Maybe it should go before the store. So we want to create a type. We'll call it repo is an interface. Right now we need that save method, or actually what do we call it? Create. So we'll say create, and create will take in a quote, which is a quote, and it will return an error. Nice. Now we'll need a concrete implementation of this interface, which we'll call nmem store. This is a struct. If I can spell it, struct has just a single item right now, and we're going to call that store, where store is our map, right? The map where the key is an integer and the value is quote. Now let's build that factory function. And this is what we're calling in our benchmark right over here, new nmem store. So new nmem store, won't take anything, but it will return an nmem store. And here, let's say we want to return the nmem store, the nmem store, we need to set store, and let's create our map. We'll call it unapologetically store, where we want to say make map int quote, and then store equals store. We probably want to seed some data, but we're just doing some small changes here at a time. Let's see. Our test is still failing, right? Because we're calling a create method, yet we have not created the create method. We have the signature for it, so let's just grab that. Come down here. So func, this is going to be our nmem store, which kind of looks weird. Maybe we'll just call it s. And nmem store, we'll paste in what we copied. Now let's implement this, right? So we have our s.store, which now really looks weird. How about we call that m for memory store? Naming things is hard. And we still want to make leverage of that count variable, so we'll say count plus, and again, this is not again, I don't know why I say that. Count is a global variable at the moment. It's in here somewhere. There it is. So we're just incrementing count. That really should probably live above here. Okay, there we go. We're going to increment count. Count becomes the key, although, wouldn't it be better instead if we, on the quote, no ID. Let's come back up to quote. Let's add an ID to our quote. It's an int. Let's give it a JSON tag. And back down here, let's say that the quote ID is equal to count. And then maybe this will read it better. Quote ID is the primary key, or the key in the store dictionary map. And we'll set it to quote. All right. This is very unlikely to fail. We'll just return nil. We need it to return an error though, because when we swap this out for Postgres or Mongo or whatever we decide to use in the future, we want to not have to change the interface. And let's see, we've got our create method. Well, I think our benchmark is happy. However, and we could test this, right? Actually, let's test this. So I can now run go test bench. I say test, but we want to benchmark it. Ooh, our tests are failing. So perhaps we say instead we want to just run the benchmark, and it's doing its thing. Pass, cool, 1.937 seconds. All right, so some issues, right? When we ran just go test with the bench, it still ran our tests, as you can see, and now we've got some failures. We need to go and refactor our handler to use our new logic. Let's go back to main.go. I'm going to give ourselves some more real estate. We're about to modify a lot of code. Let's go to our application. It now needs not a store here like this, but instead it will take a repo. Okay, our new app will now take a store, which is a repo. We don't need to do this stuff here. I'm going to comment this out. We will need to do that, but probably in the factory. Well, maybe we do it here. Maybe we change how we do it. All right, now we need to add, store is already in there. Okay. All right. Let's see. Oh, actually, now let's say that the store. I'm going to take this. I'm just going to copy it. Let's put it instead in our factory function for the nmem store. Cool. Although we should probably also address our ID, where it becomes count, and now becomes kind of important to increment count. There we go. So every time, or when this gets called, We increment it to 1 because by default it's the nil value of 0. Now it's 1. I'm going to try to look at the camera more. I'm still new to this. So now we increment count to 1 from 0. We set count to be the primary key or the key in our map, and we also set ID in our initial quote, which is our seed key value pair, seed quote. That looks good so far. I did our factory function, plugging up the store, which it was already there. We just changed the implementation. Handle quotes. All right, we got some errors, as you can see on our little mini map over here. Let's start to knock those out. So add the quote to the store. We still want to do that, but the way we do it changes now. We won't do this count business here. Count needs to happen and create, and it already is. All right, now we want to say app.store.create, just passing in quote. Okay, now this returns an error, so we'll say if error equals, error does not equal to nil. All right, if this fails, we want to grab a sample of the failure. There we go. This will work. Let's just toss this in here. Nice. So if this fails, yeah, sure, it'll be a bad request. That should do it. Okay, now that addresses the create here. Now we've got some get problems. This is, maybe we should add a little bit of a message here. So this is the get all logic, or just, yeah, get all logic, sure. And we want something that just says on our store, right, our app.store. We've only got create. Let's fix that. How about we say just all, maybe. Okay. Or all will return quotes and potentially an error. We'll want to deal with that error, but for now, let's say deal with error. Let's go create this all logic. All right, we've got the one method. I'm gonna rather lazily duplicate this, call it all. It won't take any arguments, but it will return two things: a slice of quote, didn't mean to do that, and an error. Now that we defined our signature for this all method, let's update our interface. So now our repo interface has two methods, create and all. Let's implement all. Well, all the store is a map, right? So we need to loop through that key value pair, or through those key value pairs, and update or append to quote. So let's do that now. We'll say quotes is a slice of quote. So for pk and quote ranging over m.store. And here, do we even need pk if ID is already there? Don't think so. Let's just throw that away. And we'll say append our quotes, thank you editor. And we're going to create a quote every time where the ID is the quote .id, the author is the quote .author, and the message is the quote .message. Cool. Here we're just going to return quotes and nil, right? That should knock out the all method. All right, oops, where are we? Quotes. Let's run a quick test, right? Oh, actually, we can't. We got some more errors. Let's adjust those, and then we'll just run all the tests at once. If this were a little different, I would probably have incrementally gone through each test, but let's knock it all at once, and then we're going to have a bunch of errors because we'll have to now refactor our tests. And normally, you don't modify your tests, but sometimes you change the logic, you need to modify your test. ID, right? What's going on with ID? ID declared but not used. All right, so when we get a specific ID, if found, right, we can pretty much, let's change this to instead say error. That if found, actually, you know what? Oops. We want that if found logic. I'll just rewrite it. This will instead be error. And we want to call store dot, oh, we don't have anything. How about by ID? And we'll pass in that ID. By ID doesn't exist, so let's go ahead and take care of that. Back up here again to our repository, our nmem instance of the repository. I'll just duplicate this one. We'll call it by ID, where it takes in ID as an int, and instead of returning a slice, it returns just a quote. Logic is a little different, so let's say quote and found. Let's hit our store, asking for the ID. All right, if not found, couldn't find it, right, we want to return an error. So return a quote and an error. We don't have any sentinel errors. Where are we actually saying not found? ID must be a positive integer. Oh, I deleted it. Well, our test has it, right? So let's go up to our test. Non-existent ID. Couldn't find quote matching that ID. Sure, that'll work. All right, let me just use this. Use only the keys instead of the mouse. Let's come back over here up to the top. This is where I kind of like to put the sentinel errors. Error quote not found is equal to errors.new, pass in that cool string. Now let's go back to where we were defining our by ID method. Now we'll return error quote not found. If it is found, we just return the quote nil. Easy peasy. Back down here to where ID was an error. All right, by ID, didn't I just, oh, the interface. Maybe we can get there faster going this way. By ID, let's grab the signature. Again, come to our interface. And we got a three method interface now. Cool, by ID. Now back down here to where ID was. All right. Should this fail? So if error does not equal to nil, what do we do? Are we doing that error thing anywhere? Yep, let's grab this. We're just taking that error value, which in Go, errors are things. Primitive data structures is just an interface really with a single method. So we want to just get the string on it. Let's grab that, come down here, paste it in. Bad request. Actually, that's not bad request, that's not found. We would have gotten that in our test. All right. We have one more error, and that's log, right? Well, now log wants a new app rather wants a repository. Well, now we can just say new nmem store. I think we just addressed all of our errors in main.go. We have refactored it to use a store. Instead of just directly putting the map in the handler, we now inject it. We dependency inject it into our factory function to stand up the application. Good deal. And we're using an interface for our repos, so that in the future when we want to use Postgres, we unplug our nmem data store and wire up Postgres or wire up Mongo or wire up some graph database, which would be incredible overkill for this, but just throwing out different types of databases, ways of persisting. We could use a file. All right, let's see here. We have some errors. It's probably how we're standing up our application. Same thing we just did in main. This can now be new nmem store. All right, well, we have some problems. Our quotes now have an ID, so all those tests will fail. But rather than just me telling you that, let's just run some tests. How about we take off the bench for now, because it's going to take a little longer to run, even though that's what we were trying to accomplish with this. Let's add some verbosity, and let's just run our tests. Ooh, only 3 failures. Interestingly, the ones where we're getting things. So now let's make this a little smaller. I'm going to say run. Let's just run the non-existent test first, just to make it a little smaller. And you need a little bit of space between run and the argument. There we go. And maybe make it even a little clearer. Okay, so got error, couldn't find quote matching that ID. We expected couldn't find quote matching that ID. One is an error, one is a message. Okay, well, I quickly copied and pasted that. And if we go to that specific use case where non-existent ID, let's go down to or up to our handler where we're getting a specific ID. Let's see, non-existent ID. We got error, we expected a message. I'm passing in error. Maybe instead that says message. Now let's run our test again. Pass. Let's take off non-existent ID, just run get. No route is failing. Okay, let's run just that one. You can kind of see it up there. Maybe we can just work off that. We got quotes with an ID. We actually expected two different things. First, let's deal with the ID. We need to add ID to our expected message in the test. Let's see, we'll go here. All right, but we're actually expecting two things. We're only getting back one. Oh, the reason for that is in the post I add another thing, in the get I don't. If we take off the get, it's still failing. Let's go up to no route, get no route. Got, it expects ID, so it does expect two things. ID 2, but if we look over in expected, Gandhi expects an ID, but Bill and Ted, or Bill expected, does not expect an ID, and it should. So let's quickly fix that, and we know that it's ID of 2. I should still have that in the clipboard, 2. Okay, let's run that again. We only have one failure now. Get success. Well, we got something with an ID. We expected something without an ID. Let's fix that. I cannot talk. I already have it. Let's see, paste. Let's run our test again. Cool beans. And to top this thing off, let's now go back and run our benchmark. All right, awesome. So we just refactored to add a benchmark, but we used TDD to kind of define the contract. What do we expect this behavior where we just test the store as opposed to testing the full API, like our end-to-end test. Actually, let me talk to the camera. I'll get this right eventually. Okay, so we use TDD to add a benchmark, but really we added in an nmem store as a repository that we wired up into our application. However, the benchmark allowed us to just benchmark the creation of a quote, which let's document that in our README file, and then when we swap it out for Postgres, we'll see just how much of an improvement or how worse it gets. Let's finish that off right now, and let's see. Let's go back over to the editor. I made some changes real quick. Let's go to our README file. We'll add a section in here for benchmarking. Benchmarks. How do you run a benchmark? Let's just, where am I going? Let's do this. Maybe we'll say sample from nmem store. Again, we want bash. Let's just copy this whole thing. Paste. Cool. All right. Let's do a get status. We made some changes. We have a main test go swap. I have it open somewhere else. We'll not add that, but I just do get commit. We added a feature, nmem repository. Sure. We'll leave off the fact that we did benchmarks. All right. I'm going to add a tag since that's kind of tag worthy. So we're at 3. Oops. Okay. That should do it. All right. Thank you for hanging out with me. Hopefully you learned a little something. If not, you got some code to play around with. Make some hypotheses and experiment to make your own benchmarking nmem repository API decisions. Thank you so much. Have a good one.